From the Cyber Hub bunker and studio, you're tuning in to the Cyber Hub podcast. And now for your host and CISO, James Azar.
Top of the morning, security gang. Welcome. What's happening, buddy?
Coffee cup cheers.
Coffee cup cheers. You know, I don't have my coffee in front of me. I feel really, really bad. But for those who don't know, welcome to another Friday conversation. We actually did plan this one out and we posted it ahead of time, which I think is kind of exciting because, you know, typically you and I shoot off the hip sometimes. We're like, choo, choo, choo. But today we're not.
Well, now we have a framework that we can use for future shows. We
do have a framework because today's show's on frameworks. So good morning to everyone tuning in. We are live. This is a 100% live stream. My name's James Azar, practitioner, CISO. I'm introducing my co-host, Chris Foulon, practitioner, CISO, all-around great guy, author, right? Coach.
Couple books, yeah.
A father.
All things.
A dedicated friend. A lot of great qualities about one individual. So we've got today's show's all about frameworks. We're kind of not debating what's better, but rather what's the difference between like a CIS 20 to NIST to MITRE to all these other frameworks, you know, including a lot of people look at NERC SIP requirements and compliance frameworks and think those are somehow related to what you do as a practitioner. And I think there's a big difference. And then I'm going to break that down here real quick, and then I'm going to have Chris kind of intervene on our behalf. So here's the deal. There are cybersecurity, governance, and operational frameworks. Those are CIS, NIST, and MITRE. Then there's a whole bunch of other stuff out there. A lot. NERC SIP for utilities. Fintech's got their own frameworks, and they're all compliance frameworks. Now, in case you missed any sort of LinkedIn or Twitter discussion anytime in the last 10 years, compliance doesn't equal security.
Well, let me take a little step back for the folks. There's really three levels of frameworks. There's frameworks that operate at the enterprise level, and those are typically risk management frameworks for the enterprise to use. Then there's operational frameworks that operate at the mid-tier. They provide the guidance, the policies, the procedures, and then you have the bottom layer that provides the controls that meets those policies and then helps you with the procedures. The control frameworks is what a lot of people focus on and think that those are the ultimate frameworks and only to use those. But you have to use them in a tiered approach when you think about how you're going to enable your organization to develop a maturity program around compliance, risk, safety, and security.
Yeah, and great points, but I love that, by the way. Kind of look at it from the enterprise all the way down, but no matter what role you have in cyber, frameworks play part of your role.
Yes.
Essentially, any controls that you do from an analyst level all the way to a CISO are mapped against frameworks. So a lot of times people think frameworks are exclusively for leadership. They're not. They're primarily for what I like to call the actual practitioners, the people doing all the heavy lifting, the analysts, the engineers, where as leadership, we reference those as part of our strategy roadmap for the organization. But really frameworks are essential for practitioners at every level, you know. And if we talk of specific frameworks, I want to start off with the CIS top 20 because that's my favorite. I also think that and the reason it's my favorite is because I think it's very operational and very practical. And CIS top 20 is literally about controls. And it's controls across all the different disciplines and all the different technology or assets you would have in your organization. So if you've got servers on-prem, they have controls for that. If you're on a cloud, you've got controls for that. Identity, controls, infrastructure, controls. And it's a real control framework that's very, very actionable. So when you think of starting a program or trying to benchmark a program, there's a lot of debate over what framework is best. My personal opinion, I'm not saying it's right, and you can write me in the comments and call me, you know, all the names you'd like if you disagree with it. but I think CIS is the right framework there.
Well, I will take an opposing stance.
Please.
I like the NIST CSF framework, which stands for the NIST Cybersecurity Framework. And the reason that I tend to prefer the NIST CSF framework is because in all of the different stages of that framework, it looks to include the business, privacy, vendor supply, and additional things that many frameworks don't take. And this kind of provides the business with a holistic approach when you're looking at developing a program that's right for them. The other thing about NIST CSF is that NIST has worked really hard to almost make this a Rosetta Stone that is translatable to almost every framework out there. So when you look at a certain section in the NIST CSF, it'll say the controls here might mimic the controls in CIS 18.1 or whatever, but it kind of provides that Rosetta Stone, that translation from NIST to ISO to CIS and so on. So you can use it almost as a guardrail for all your other frameworks to operate around, including your favorite CIS.
Yeah, I get what you're saying about NIST CSF, but I think because it's a Rosetta Stone, right? Rosetta Stone is great for the basics, but then it lacks depth. And you can't get depth with a Rosetta Stone. You can get surface, you can get overall view, whereas in CIS is extremely specific. And I think when you look at most of the problems that exist for cybersecurity practitioners today within any organization, it's primarily the basics: patching, vulnerability management, endpoint management, asset discovery, etc. If even most recently, if you look at Zscaler, the whole Zscaler thing that happened during the week of RSA, right? Everyone freaking out. Zscaler got hacked. Intel broker putting stuff out there, going, "Hey, we've got Zscaler all figured out." And then you figure out that it was just a test environment that had no real prod data in it. Well, CIS framework would have been able to prevent that altogether if you had the right controls in place. And I think that's the one thing is I look, NIST CSF is great. I'm not dismissing NIST because I think NIST has a lot of value. But when it comes when I get to brass tacks, the CIS controls list, if you were auditing a program you just took over, right, Chris, and it's your first 100 days, you're using NIST over CIS?
Yes, because NIST, when you look and you dive into each section of NIST, they'll break down the controls. They'll break down even how to implement, say, CIS top 10 into the controls needed for each subcategory.
I get you. Not sold. I'm not, and again, I get it, but I just feel like if you're trying to do real actionable stuff right off the bat, you still go NIST over CIS?
Yes, because it provides you with that suggestion or guardrail to find what's right for your organization based on your maturity to do what's right for the business. Instead of saying,
how do you determine maturity?
How do you determine maturity? Well, you have a conversation between all the leaders sitting at the table and go, do we understand what our critical assets are? And if none of them can say, yes, here's my list of critical assets, you're probably not mature.
Love that. Now, for audience members, people listening either live or after the fact, how many of you can answer that question that Chris just asked? How many in your business can actually answer that question that Chris just asked? Wholeheartedly, with 100% confidence, sitting on the back of their chair going, I know all my assets. Don't tell me a thing about it. How many? Well, what's your guess?
1%. Because even if they say, oh, well, Salesforce is my core inventory of customer databases. Okay, how do you protect that? What do you do to secure it? Does it talk to other things? Does it feed in from other things? All those little trickle into what they think their main core application is often overlooked. And when you have a cyber resiliency event like a ransomware, poof, your data that might be fed in from a server into your Salesforce now gets encrypted, and you lost all access to that.
All right, just a second here. I'm going to stick something on the screen real quick. I hope y'all are ready for it. There we go. Everyone's seen this before, right? The famous security rainbow, onion, whatever you want to call it. Give it whatever name you want.
Mm-hmm.
Mission critical IP right there in the middle. Obviously, text here is really small. One of the designers I work with is editing this as we speak. Now, if you take a look at this security onion, if you look, you're starting here, right? Your idea of maturity is, can you tell me what our mission critical assets, IP, and operational stuff is?
Yeah, because without knowing that, what the heck are you protecting?
So the argument here to be made is, there's an argument to be made here, Christoph. So hang with me, buddy. Okay.
Okay.
The argument is, if you start with CIS top 20 and you start at your perimeter, network, cloud, and endpoint, just those four, right? You're hardening your environment and you're maturing everything around it until you discover this. Because if the idea is you've got to do this discovery first before you can do anything here, then the challenge you're doing is you're leaving all of these a bit open. Now, these have nothing to do with mission critical IP. These are just basic hygiene. Do the right access control, have IDS.
Well, access control. How do you determine what are you accessing? What level is right for that access, which then moves into like role-based access control, user-based access control.
So let's go into that. Let's deep dive into that for a minute, because what you're trying to say is, how do you know how to do something? But if it's not being done to begin with, then anything is better than nothing. So the idea of CIS controls over a NIST CSF is maturity. It takes a while to identify an organization's maturity. You're not doing it in your first 100 days. I did an article.
No, you're not. You're not. But
you saw my article on Substack this week where I said CISO tenure, where it was all about CISO tenure. And it takes a CISO an average of 300 days. Mm-hmm. And I've done this because I've spoken to a lot of CISOs, right? You and I are interconnected. We intermingle, we intermix. We talk to a lot of our peers. So if you look at a lot of CISOs, it takes you 300 days to even remotely start to do anything meaningful. But in those 300 days, you've got to be able to do some basic blocking and tackling. And irregardless to maturity, irregardless to risk posture, you've got to be able to say, I want to go brass tacks right now. I just want to look at controls in place, not around anything, but I just want to harden my environment.
So brass tacks, access control to your mission critical IP.
You don't know what it is. You don't know.
Wait. It could be that you're starting out with, hey, let's put access control around our Salesforce, because we know Salesforce happens to hold some of our mission critical things. This other application holds some of our mission critical things. We're not going to get super granular until we get really mature and we go down to that data security. But at least we have to identify what our business does and how to secure it. So physical security, the building that we work in, IDS, the cloud stacks that we're using, the data center that we're using, we have to be able to identify all that in order to put that minimum perimeter around it. Then for the second layer, you look at your firewall. Okay, well, you got to know, these are the types of things that we want to block. These are the things that we want to allow. So you're gaining your maturity a little bit there. Cloud security. oh, now we have to get more granular, understand our mission critical assets even more particular, so that we can encrypt them. We could provide identity and access management to privileged information like secrets and vaults. You put data loss protection around, oh, this is our sales list. So we're getting now much more granular. Patch management. Oh, our on-prem AD needs patching. Well, we know that identity is stored there, so we want to ensure that we're doing patch management there. Then you can start to get down into threat modeling and secure coding. And if you're really good, then you can really start to put some RBAC controls on there, some data loss prevention that lives specifically on the documents, so that you really control who can access that secret sauce of 17 ingredients that makes my chicken so good.
You're going through a granular exercise of identifying maturity, and we're seeing the same thing here. The only difference is, in most cases, no one can ever tell me what mission critical IP is. No one can, right?
Not specifically, but at least from a business sense, you have to identify.
I'll put it to you like this. I'll put it to you like this. I actually posed this question. I was in the Big Apple yesterday, and I posed this question to a few people I met with, and I said, define mission critical assets.
I would define it as what generates revenue for the organization. Simple as that.
So fine.
Start there.
Wonderful. Let's start there. All right. So then that means that your payment collection system and your product delivery are the most important, but then everything else can sit aside. The challenge you have with that is there's other aspects that support those operation that may not be customer facing, that are even more critical than the customer facing assets. And this is where we get to the exercise that I like to do, where, when you're doing a tabletop exercise, when you're going through some sort of incident response, which, by the way, the best way to identify, I think, maturity in an organization is not to look at any one of these frameworks. Do a tabletop exercise in your first 100 days in the role. Get everyone in a room for 4 hours. Bring someone in, a consultant, someone who actually knows how to run a tabletop. Have them do some homework. Have them come in with a scenario. Put the right people across the room and let them go through that exercise. And I guarantee you, the first thing you'll ever hear, if you've ever been in a tabletop exercise, from anyone who's in engineering or product development, turn it off. Turn it off, then we'll figure it out. And you're like, so you're taking your business offline. All right, have you done a backup and restore exercise to know how long that's going to take?
Nope.
No. Okay, so what you want to do is you want to take everything offline, right? To give yourself time to figure things out. Paralyzing the business for God knows how long until you can rebuild your environment.
Yeah, you have to do the calculation. How much money are you losing per hour that you're down? You're offline. So that is the risk that you're taking if you take that approach. Now,
but that's the approach almost every business takes. Look at every ransomware attack in recent history. What do they say? We've had to take some of our systems offline. No, you didn't take some of your systems offline. You took all of your systems offline. All of them, every single one, right? Every single one of your systems is offline. And you're slowly trying to bring them back up based on what you can clear first, based on complexity. And typically the stuff you use the least are the least complex to restore. So you're restoring the stuff that you don't really need
in the wrong order.
Because you never accordingly planned. Now, I want to go back to frameworks, because now what we're talking about is incident response. But we're really talking about planning, but that goes to resiliency. And that resiliency lies within the controls of your framework. And the controls, the mother of all controls, is the CIS top 20. That's what I'm trying to get to. The mother of all controls is the CIS top 20. We're
saying the same thing, because that the NIST CSF framework just says, hey, start to identify what your business is, your business environment. And then you can start to be able to look to detect, respond, recover. But if you don't identify what your stuff is, you can't do any of the other steps.
You always hope that you can identify all your assets before you're a victim of a cybercrime.
Yes, you should know at least your critical assets. Now you might
that's not always the case, right? That's not always the case. The very famous one, by the way, was here in the city of Atlanta. Our former mayor, not the current mayor, Keisha Lance Bottoms, within her first 100 days, the city of Atlanta had a crippling ransomware attack. Very, very famous. A lot of people heard about it. That really paralyzed the city. Was in her first 100 days. She hadn't even really put all the right people in play. Did the city have a CISO? They had a CISO who departed, and they had someone fairly new in there.
Mhm.
They had an IT team that was fairly knowledgeable, but the city's assets were so distributed and so many systems were impacted, and the scale of the ransomware attack was sheerly unbelievable, right? That it took forever to recover. It took the city like 4 or 5 months to recover. Now, Lance Keisha Bottoms, as the mayor at the time, refused to even negotiate with the threat actors or pay any ransom. She said, "We're not doing that. We're not rewarding these guys for the work they did." I
Right.
appreciate her stance. I think it was very, very brave. It's unfortunate that she only served one term, right?
Yes.
Unfortunate. However, at the same time, you have to look at what went on behind the scenes. And the something that very, very basic that came out of that was because the CISO had departed, because there was a gap in security, there was no consistency. And the one thing to me about the CIS top 20 is those controls are understandable to the most simple of IT people
Yeah.
and the most simple of developers.
Yeah.
And to me, they're very, very actionable for someone like in that position where as the NIST CSF, because of its approach to risk, which is IT people don't speak in risk language, they speak in operations. I need to have X systems online at all times. I need to be able to support X things. I need to be able to meet these KPIs. Their KPIs are very different from security. Security's KPIs are based predominantly around risk, whereas in IT's KPIs are predominantly based around operational KPIs. And so we speak a different language. And that's where I think the NIST CSF is great for governance on the cyber side of the house. But the CIS really breaks down the barriers that exist with the IT on the operation side of the house.
So go back to your security onion.
Go back to the onion. We're
Go
back
back to the onion. Okay. What's right there, right below mission critical at the bottom? Bottom, right, or left, depending on how you're looking at the screen. Right there.
JRC security operation.
GRC. You need governance, risk, and compliance to set up the framework for which controls you're going to use.
Yeah, to me, I have IT security governance here, right? And I'm gonna point that out because to me, I reference IT security governance. To me, has always been in my career the CIS top 20, right? I learned that. I can't even say how long it's been, right? It's been a while. And the reason I say that is because I think one framework we haven't spoken about is MITRE. And to me, MITRE sits right here, security operations.
Yes.
Right? That's where MITRE sits. MITRE, attack, defend, now even embed, right? I mean, there's a whole bunch of MITRE frameworks that I think are operational in nature. But then I take the security onion here and I go down governance, risk, and compliance. We're looking at pen testing to identify vulnerabilities. IT security governance, to me, that's the CIS top 20 because the CIS really does approach predominantly what's in the IT wheelhouse. Right? It's predominantly IT based, whereas in NIST is beyond IT.
I don't agree. If I could share my screen, actually let me share a blog link with you. But what it does is it shows in the identify inventory, right, from NIST CSF in the very beginning. And then what does it do? It cross-references two controls to a control framework which sits below it, which it points to CIS 5.5. See if you can see it in the comments there.
Let me take a look. Would you mind sending it in the private chat?
Yes.
I can't copy paste from the comments, unfortunately, with the streaming software here, but in our private chat, I can.
Okay, there we go.
And I just want to be mindful of time, folks. We are
almost at time.
We're almost out of time. Yeah. Let me just bring that up here.
So it's like right there, like the first part of the article. We're developing an identity inventory. And that's very early on in your security stage of even, darn cookies, let's accept them or close it out. Scroll down. Yeah, right there. So we're talking about identifying our inventory of identity assets. And that means your credentials, your users, everything. But that's NIST CSF isn't a control, it's a framework. So it points back to CIS 5.5, 5.6, 6.6 to be the control for this framework. And I think that's where a lot of people get confused, right? NIST CSF is the framework that kind of governs everything. And then the control set, if you want to stay on NIST, is NIST 853, 800-53 series. Those would be the controls that would sit in that middle column where CIS is. So I think like that should clarify for a lot of people that CSF isn't a control framework, it's a governance framework, which is fine because you need that governance to help you implement your control frameworks, which the CIS is. It's not a governance framework.
Yeah, completely agree with that. There's a lot more to go into, but we don't have the time, and I don't want to go down that path right now. I want to leave everyone hungry for more. Understand and Manage Security Risk. Love that book, by the way.
This book I helped Ryan write in, and I contributed specifically to the section about marrying control, governance, and all the frameworks and how they tie down together so that a business leader could understand how to manage and measure cyber risk. So that's the reason that I'm showing this book. Great weekend reading. Check it out. Ryan Liebrecht is the author.
Awesome. Well, team, that's it for our show today. I think we're going to come back next week. We'll probably do another deep dive on frameworks. I think we're going to do Demystifying Cybersecurity Frameworks Part 2 next week. We're really kind of maybe take one and really kind of hone in on it. And do that. So that's it for our show. Chris, thank you for being here. Hey, y'all, make sure to follow us, subscribe, follow Breaking Into Cybersecurity, follow the Cyber Hub podcast. Let us know. You can reach out to either one of us. Our LinkedIn profiles are in the show notes. Let us know if you want us to cover a topic. We'll happily do so. Thanks, everyone. Have a great weekend. Thanks, Chris. Take care, buddy.
Have a great week. Bye.
We love feedback, so make sure to connect with us on social media and subscribe to our podcast on your favorite podcast listening platform.